In 2023, 3 members of the Brevard School Board, after learning that a member of BPS Watch, a local school board watchdog community, had been selected to sit on the Independent Citizen Committee for Millage Oversight ICCMO, engaged in an illegal attempt to remove the member from the committee. The ICCMO provides general oversight of the operating expenditures made through funds generated by the 1.0 mil ad valorem millage and property taxes approved by the voters in 2022. The member was selected in accordance with the rules and processes outlined in the ICCMO Charter, a charter written by and approved by the Brevard School Board. The following videos show Brevard School Board members Matt Susin, D4, Trent, D2, and Megan Wright, D1, try to illegally bypass the ICCMO Charter to remove the BPS Watch member from the committee. The ICCMO member in question had been a vocal critic of BPS policies that these 3 board members had supported. The attempt to oust the committee member ultimately failed after the illegality and unscrupulousness of trying to bypass the charter was pointed out to the 3 board members.
We're back on to F16. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, I do. I have some discussion on this. Board, I reached out to Ms. Kershaw and asked some questions about the process of, sorry, my mic's not on, how we're going through this process of selecting members for this committee. I think it's very important for the integrity of the committee to be respected by the community. There was a lack of some questions I thought that were very, very important. And so I asked Ms. Kershaw about that, and she said, no, unfortunately, and that's our fault. I will own that because we didn't ask them initially to seek out some information. So I'm just asking if at all possible, can we possibly move this to give Ms. Kershaw a little bit more time to provide the details of the questions that I asked her? Specifically in regards to individuals' financial background, I think it's important when we're talking about oversight for the millage that they have a solid, sound financial background. I just would like to have that. I think it makes the integrity of the community or the committee that much stronger.
So are you asking to table it until the next meeting? Is that
I am
what you're
asking,
saying?
yes.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to table this agenda item on consent until the August 8th meeting, is it?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Paul, do you want me to go through the motion process for that, or is that good enough? We didn't motion on that, so. Okay, so we're good. So that's all she needs?
Do we want to finish the
Okay.
discussion?
Yeah, we will. I'm just saying, like, the motion needs to be opened up, and I didn't know if we needed to say in the motion that, but he says we're good. So, all right, let's get to discussion. Since Ms. Wright, if you have, you stated that, is there anything else that you wanted to state?
No, I'm honestly, I think it probably will end up being okay, but I just think for the integrity of the committee, it's important to have that in case it ever gets called into question by any of the citizens. We should make sure that we're looking at all facts.
Anybody else have any other comments?
What do you mean by financial backgrounds? Like professional backgrounds?
No, I think no, not professional financial backgrounds, but I think when you're talking about oversight with the millage, we want to make sure that we don't have anything funky on there. And I don't know that it's been looked at for all the members. When I asked her that, she said
What does
no.
that mean?
Well, bankruptcies, foreclosures, things like that.
So you're asking that we look into private citizens' financial backgrounds in order to participate in their local oversight committee that they pay taxes for.
I think it would be wise, yes.
Okay. I just want to make that very clear that you want us to inquire about the financial backgrounds of private citizens who pay taxes on the committee in which oversees those taxes that they pay.
I think it would be wise. Yes, I think that it's a good idea.
I just want to make that really, really clear. That's beyond inappropriate and intrusive in my personal opinion. Because quite frankly, we don't even have that qualification to be elected to this board.
It's not qualification.
I said it's not a qualification to be a member of this board. You are absolutely correct. And we make a lot more decisions than the Independent Oversight Committee. I think you are treading on a fine line there. So I just need to make that very clear publicly.
All right. Anybody else have any other discussion points?
Before I say what I would say, what other questions? So if you could have specific, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you shared with Ms. Kershaw as far as what questions you want added to the the process.
I just think that the general application process was very vague. And so that was the other part that I wasn't very clear on. So I just asked Ms. Kershaw, can we look at this to just, I think as board, we need to know who is on that committee. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's on here now. But the process itself, I believe, will be called into question if we don't do our due diligence on everyone that sits on the committee.
Sue's not here. Can we go back to, there was when it was presented, I think Sue was when she was serving as interim superintendent, but there was kind of a process. The school's foundation received the applications, and then they had a team. Was it the school's foundation board that submitted these? Let me look at the agenda items that submitted these. They managed it and they selected it. So the foundation's board, correct, Dr. Rendell? Is that?
That is.
I think that may be the steps that would have been taken or should have been taken, but I don't know that the board reviewed all the applications or anything like that. I think that's a question for Mrs. Kershaw.
Okay. Here is, because I want us to go back to process and the policy in this case is the charter, and the charter is attached to the agenda item. And I too had questions when I looked at the list, just because, and I went back and I'm like, okay, it wasn't the same kind of questions. I mean, honestly, I haven't Googled people's financial information, so I don't, that's not what stuck out to me. But there was what it says in Article 6, membership. Number 2, here's the qualifications that were listed. ICCMO members shall be residents of Brevard County. Check, there's one. Yeah. Who have expertise in fields relating to the purpose of the millage. Now, that's still pretty broad, but that tells me that their expertise needs to be in the area of finance, accounting, that type of thing, or education, perhaps technology, because we're using part of it for that. Those kinds of fields. And so if there weren't, and then it's things that you can't be, like you can't be a school board member, you can't be a current employee of the school board, and you can't have a conflict of interest and with the Florida chapter on that. And it said, so that's pretty much it. So here's the things we're looking for. And then there's a few things that disqualify you. I think it would probably be inappropriate, because of the charter, which this board has already approved, for us to put anything outside of the charter as part of the application process. If we want to go back and we want to make sure that what we said was going to happen, happened, as far as the application process, if we want to check that, I don't have a problem with that. But to me, we've laid out in this board approved charter really just 2 qualifications with a few disqualifications of that. They have to be a resident of the county and they need to be an expert in the field. So if there was nothing on that application where they had to explain what area are you in expertise, and it doesn't have to be like, they don't have to be an accountant, but right. They do need to have, they can't just be a taxpayer in the county. Again, if we to go anywhere outside of that, because that was already what was approved and that was advertised was the charter, I think that we would be going outside of the parameters. I'm just going to look really quickly into the selection process, because I think it said that how we're going to get started, to make sure that we follow that. Which section is it in? Sorry.
It's okay.
I didn't see it.
Does it say where's the part where it talks about how we're going to get them started? Hang on. How about let's just do a search.
We come back to you so we can.
No, that's pretty, it's not in there. But we need to, I think it was probably an agenda item when we approved it, but like I said, I'm not comfortable with that. But we can go back if those 2 particular things weren't looked at, then they do need to be looked at. If they live in the county, and are they, I guess 3 things: live in the county, do they have an area of expertise, and do they not have one of the disqualifying things?
Okay, Mr. Trent, you wish to speak to anything?
So if Ms. Wright's just asking to push this to the August 8th,
Right.
and you're hoping to get your questions answered, I actually have some questions myself, but yeah, I'm not going to ask you what your questions are. If you have some questions that need answering, I'm all for pushing it to the 8th. Not a problem with that.
Yeah, I think the motion is supported. I mean, there's this millage has the potential to be 272 million plus. That's a good question to ask. I think if you're wanted to do that, I'm completely in favor, and I think that pretty much sums it up for me. It's a no-brainer because it also will protect individuals who may have something, because people will come out and go after them if they do. So
It may
I'd
very
love to
well
have it.
come back in 2 weeks that this is completely fine. I
Yeah.
just don't know that all the questions were asked and answered. And it sounds like Ms. Kershaw would appreciate the additional time to be able to do that. So when I spoke to her, so it may come back and the list is exactly the same and there's nothing there, and that's fine. It's totally fine. But I just don't think, I think we
Okay.
need to do the due diligence. That's all.
All right.
I have a
Seeing that
follow-up.
we have
Just really quick.
I have a
on-
follow-up too.
Okay, just really quick on the financial part, just remember that an application is not going to be exempt to public record. And so if we're asking people to submit financial, which again, is not in the charter, that I'm still going to have a problem with, because then it becomes public record. So, right, Mr. Gibbs? So another just caution against that, because I think we have potential to get in trouble if we're asking stuff outside the parameters of what we originally advertised.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So I appreciate your evaluation, Ms. Campbell, but I explicitly asked if it was based on your experience or based on your personal situation. And the response was the concern was someone's personal situation. And I can only assume that there's something going on here that's just smells really, really wrong. And so I'm just going to say it one more time. We have board members who have questionable financial backgrounds, but they're still here as functioning adults to make the decisions for this school system. So I caution whatever the intention is here to pry into private citizens who pay taxes that fund this very millage itself.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we have a majority moving forward.
Do we need to vote on it because
Yep.
the motion was?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
We need-
Second.
So Eugene's a second. Is there any discussion? We already did that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
I clarified the motion. So
The motion is to table
it.
this until August 8th to
Right.
give Ms. Kershaw an opportunity to look into the finances of the individuals.
No, to read the application.
the applications.
No, that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay,
That's
so
exactly what
to
we're
review the applications to see if there's any inadequacies, because I'm okay with that. And so by doing that, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
They.
Okay, it passes. Moving. If nobody has anything to say about
So,
it?
I mean, yeah, we had discussed this before, and I do think it would be smart of us to put some guidelines around who's on the board, just because it just seems like it could become you could have a conflict of interest. You could have somebody that's sitting on that board that could steer a committee one direction or the other. And so I don't, that this is probably a deeper conversation where we're going to have to look at what would those prerequisites be that we were looking for. But, if they're actively suing our district, does that potentially pose from them being on a committee? I don't know. Those are questions or discussions that the board should probably have just to make sure that they're not anything.
And I think what we're looking for are some of the same standards that we hold our employees to in regards to behavior while you're part of our school system. I think that's the kind of 30,000-foot view that we're talking about. Standard of conduct, I see this on here. You know what I mean? Lawsuits. I don't think you should be sitting on one of our boards if you're openly involved in a lawsuit or actively going to try to pursue one. You know what I mean?
Or possibly paying for ads that
Right.
go against the school board.
Right,
or-
stuff, things, having conflicts of interests are there. You know what I mean? So I think that there's so I think this is a great topic. How did, you guys wanted to move forward? Do you want to send some of those in so that they can put them together and come back? Because I think that our teams are probably waiting for that credentialing. Or do you want to have?
Hang on, because we're kind of talking around, but
No, we're
just,
pretty
let's
much-
just be very clear. I want to make sure that I understand, because we kind of talked about last time, and then but we're not talking about a specific board. You're talking about whenever we have a board, advisory board, would that extend also to people that we appoint to, what are those committees in the
Yeah,
cities? that we do?
absolutely.
I'm
The
just,
audit committee,
Yeah, if you're,
Right.
yes.
planning and zoning,
Yep.
that's the one I was thinking about. So, it's interesting that first of all, I have a little, we just need to be careful. Because I have a few concerns. One, some of these that we have charters, and what we really need to do is abide by the charter. If we want to adjust the charter, we can adjust the charter, but we need to, if we do something outside of the charter, like we had that conversation a couple weeks ago, it needs to be according to what the charter says, because that's what we've established. If we go outside of that, I think we might get into some funky territory. Two, it's interesting that you mentioned what we expect of our employees, because some of these lawsuits involved, other kinds of things, we don't have that. We don't, nobody brought it up today, but some people have, somebody mentioned a couple weeks ago, like financial thing. We don't go into our employees' finances. They could be bankrupt. That's not something that we do. The other thing is First Amendment. We may not like somebody putting ads, and listen, I speak that as someone who has been spoken of. I may have gotten a few cheers tonight, but I have had my share of jeers. And that's just part of the role. And I may not like it, but it's someone's First Amendment rights, right, whether they're our employee or somebody from the public, to say those things. So I think that's a little, I'm just not comfortable with that. I think I would certainly want significant legal review. I'd also, as I frequently do, if we're going to do something like that, I'd kind of like to see some patterns from other places and just see or other districts or whatever we can kind of look at a model, so that we're not flying in the dark as to how we might envision this. I'm not saying we can't do something that nobody's ever done, but I would, if you have examples of other organizations that do things like this, most of the things that we appoint people to, committees, or planning and zoning audit committee, we appoint them as board members. They are our representative, and so by being elected by the public, then we get that choice as to who we're going to put, and then we vote on them as a board. So we have that check and balance there. The independent committees, the ICOC and this new committee, the Millage Oversight Committee, are a little different because of how they've gotten started. And the ICOC, because it is an independent committee, once they got started, then they elect their own members. They go through the application process when they have an opening. And then we, again, approve it. Same thing with this new committee. We got it started with the Brevard Schools Foundation because that's the way we established it was going to start. And then in the future, they will, go through the application process, because that is supposed to be an independent, not under our thumb, not under the thumb of the district, but they're truly supposed to be independent. So, we'd had to talk about the background check. Some of that doesn't apply because they're not being around students, but at the same time, it might catch something, arrest or whatever. Would that disqualify? We never really answered this question. Would it disqualify them? We said they had to submit for a background check. If it came back with some findings, are we going to say, nope, you had an arrest in one of these areas? Is it going to be the same as with our employees? So you can't serve on this committee. I'm not defending anybody's position in being on it, but those are questions that we have to ask and answer before we start putting anything like this in place.
Yeah, I would come back and I would say, I personally feel that if you have an open lawsuit against the school district, or you're in the process of recruiting people in a lawsuit against the district, that I find that to be a conflict of interest. I don't think we should have anybody sitting on our boards that actually does that. That's just me. The other thing I wanted to say is in the background check, I think that's appropriate. I think we should ask to do, background checks and check people just to make sure, because here's what ends up happening. There's twofold to it, Ms. Campbell, and I understand where you're coming from, because it's kind of like this, well, we may not have ever done it before, but let me help you get where I'm going. there's the side of the district that says that if you do have somebody that's going to be on say there's somebody that's going to be on our ICOC, and we do a background check and find out that, hey, they had major construction violations as a contractor, and they were sued and they were doing all this stuff. Okay, so that hits. Now, it might have happened 5-6 years ago, might have been something that was resolved in the courts and all that stuff, but here's what ends up happening. That person then becomes part of it, then it wears down on the overall fidelity of that board that is reviewing it. And when you're talking about $60-70 million in taxes that are being flowed through and a voter participation, it comes to me to where I want to make sure that the individuals that are on there represent that. Does that make sense? So like let me just finish though, so that there's another side to it. So the first is we need to put together the best advisory committee that has that. And listen, lawsuits, background checks, conflicts of interest, that should be part of it. The other part is that many of these individuals don't understand what's about to happen when they become a part of our committees, because if you're on the right, the left attacks you, and if you're on the left, the right attacks you. And so all of a sudden their personal interest becomes open to the public, and it completely destroys them, right? And so I think that conversation needs to be had. But for me, I mean, I just wanted to reiterate why is those two prongs. One, if you put somebody on one of our committees that has some sort of, say, construction for the ICOC or has financial in there on the sales tax or whatever it is, then what ends up happening is, or the millage, the fidelity and the authenticity of that review committee becomes in question to our voters, which puts the value of the revenue in question too. So that's where my mind was at when we had this thing. If that helps you.
But just so you know, you're talking about something bigger than what I thought you were talking about, because our background checks that we do through the district security are going to catch arrests and convictions. I don't think they're going to catch if someone was in a lawsuit. So
Suing us is what I said. I'm not worried about
I know,
them
but you
suing
just
them.
mentioned if someone was sued because of a contract or whatever, that the only time in my recollection that I've been on the board that we've done any kind of that significant background check was when we did that for our 3 finalist superintendents. So, and we had a service that did that for us to catch all those things. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant thing to do. And I'm not saying I don't want people full of integrity in our committees. I absolutely do.
Right.
But I think I mean, like I said, our background check's not going to catch that. If you don't want someone who's gone bankrupt on a committee, our background check doesn't catch that.
No, and I don't think it would. What it will do though is that we have some very interesting individuals that are a part of our community. So they may, all of a sudden you may put a list of 10 people up, and then all of a sudden you receive this information. And now we have to make a decision. But without these restraints in place, we wouldn't be able to make it. I agree with you 100%. There's no way that we would be able to research any of all this stuff, right? But if brought to us and we have to take action and we don't have a trigger in place to do so, then that becomes an issue. And that's the reason behind the lawsuits and stuff like that. So like, look, if somebody all of a sudden gets approved, and then all of a sudden we find out, well, this person's actively going to try to get a lawsuit against us or is involved in a lawsuit against us that we missed or something like that, I feel that we should be able to have a trigger to remove that person and hire somebody else just because of the fidelity of the amount of money that the millage or the sales tax or something else. That's what I would say.
I know, but I'm just going to be quite honest. This whole conversation sounds like there's somebody that was nominated to be on a committee that we don't want to be on a committee, because we've never had this conversation before. And I would like, and whether I like them or not, I just want us to, I mean, let's just.
Ms. Campbell.
Paul, is there anything, I mean, any advice you would give just on the surface without having done a bunch of research as to the legality of what kind of restrictions we can place on especially the independent committees? Because that is where I'm very concerned, because we can't keep that independent committee under our thumb and it truly be independent for the community.
Off the top of my head, I'd have to look. You're talking like a lot of that sounds like credit checks and background checks that you do for like credit applications and things. And that's where you catch a lot of lawsuits, and what we did with the superintendents and things. There are laws that specifically address when and how you can conduct those types of background checks. I do not have them off the top of my head, so I would have to go research when we can conduct those types of background checks. You can certainly build it in, like our Millage Charter has, you have to comply with 112. Part 3 of Florida statutes, which is the Public Employees Code of Ethics. So that's in there. You can't have conflicts of interest with the district, so that's in there. So we can build them into that realm. I mean, you could build a provision that says you have to comply with district policies while you're on service.
So because that part is built into the charter as far as the conflict of interest, if it were to be found that one of the people that that is approved to serve on the committee has a conflict of interest, somebody brings that up, then what would be the recourse in that situation?
Then they wouldn't be qualified to be on the charter.
What if they were already there and we find out later?
They would be removed by a majority vote of the board.
Okay.
That's what the charter says. Yeah, the charter says
So
if the board
I guess
learns,
so in other words,
remove them.
we already have the authority if something comes up like that to
Right,
to
for
act
the
in that way.
112, I'd have to double check and see if the board policies are built into that charter. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So I will say, since you brought it up, that there is no reason behind this for an individual. What this is there's actually a reason behind. Now all of a sudden we have a large second committee that we have. We are politically divided out here, and I'm trying to keep the fidelity of the overall committee to be strong so that in the event that we need to renew it in the future, there's an opportunity to do so. And that's what this comes down to. So I wanted to kind of say that because I don't want it to be lobbed out there that that's there. And I don't think that was, I wanted to clear that up for you because it seems like that's something that you had that you wanted to make that statement for.
To be quite honest, I'm not trying to be naive, but this committee and all the committees, these aren't, and we're not talking about the book committee. We're talking about these other things. We're talking about ICOC audit. These are non-political decisions. These are accounting things. These are, okay, we said we were going to spend the money on this. Did we spend the money on this? I mean, it's pretty simple. So we talk about divided. That's the board. That's, I'm going to say the book committee, but we're not talking about that committee, those kind of committees. We're talking about these kind of committees where, I mean, you can say somebody would insert something, but they have a clear job. Their job is to be handed all the audit reports that RSM is going to create, right, for the millage twice a year. And once the money starts coming in, here's the money that's coming in, here's how we spend it. It's going to go through the audit committee, all that stuff. And we either did do what we said we were going to do, or we didn't do what we said we were going to do. And if we go to them, I'm assuming like we'll do like Sue does with the ICOC. If we have extra money and we decide, that they'll need to kind of put their seal of approval. This still fits in the plan. It's got to meet the plan. So it just seems like a lot of ado for what we're. I don't want it. It seems all this political thing, and I just don't see it as that political, that we need all this political backup. I mean, I don't know.
So I'll be honest with you. Where this triggers from is the insurance committee, where we had multiple conflicts of interest that were on there. But the fact is that while they were doing it, there was no way to trigger it. So it went on for a long time before we decided that we were going to do what was different, which was change the charter to not allow but literally right now, as it stands, there is nothing inside of our checks that goes back to when we had those conflicts of interest that allows us to do it. Because the rectifying situation back then when we had SIAC was that these individuals that had conflicts of interest that pretty much broke the law that were on our SIAC committee ended up continuing until we were saying, and it wasn't that they had the conflicts of interest that ended it, it was just that we couldn't get anything done inside the meeting. So the bottom line is that since then, until now, we don't have a set of standard of ethical conduct that we have for our board committees and appointees. That's what this is about. There's no, hang on, Ms. Campbell, there is no conspiracy theory. There is an act that occurred in the past that I was a part of that extremely upset me. And now it's come through, and there's a series of other boards that we're putting through. I would like to have a standard of ethical conduct, and I would ask you.
Yes.
I would ask you, Ms. Campbell.
Conduct, yes.
Hang on. I would ask you, do you or don't you feel that having an active lawsuit against the school district, or pushing to or actively engaging in getting a lawsuit against the district would be somebody that you would want on our committee?
I guess maybe I'm clueless. I'm not aware of who was on the list that was actively
I'm just
engaged in a
saying,
lawsuit.
I asked that question though.
If it's, I have to find out if that's legal, if that's something we can look into.
But if it is legal, would you be against? Would you be for removing somebody that has a lawsuit against Brevard Public Schools that's sitting on one of our committees.
No, would I personally do what I like that? I think that's a great idea. No.
Okay.
And by a matter of policy, am I ready to jump in there? I got to see all the legalities of it.
Well, Paul just kind of mentioned to you, and Paul, what I would ask, and what she's asking is a very good comment. I would ask what we cannot require. Because when I know anything about what a standards of conduct or regulations that a board who's creating that we have to vote on, if we have to vote on individuals being a part of our school district, then we have the authority to say what we want on that vote. We can't just be told, these are the people that are going to be on there, and oh, by the way, and all that. No, we have the authority to do it. So what I would ask, and it's a very good question because I don't want to have to put you into a position like that, Paul, if you could go back and figure out what we cannot require, and that would then give us the piece that would allow us to do that.
I have a
Okay, I'm
question.
sorry. Go
No.
ahead, Ms. Megan.
Just to clarify too, I think this would require, depending on which committee, we're going to have to amend the charter, correct? Not, is that's what you're saying? So, okay. All right.
I just, so.
And I understand the issue with SIAC because I served on SIAC when we had and saw the conflicts of interest in multiple members who were appointed by the board members and
yes.
were approved by the board
Yes.
at the time they served on the committee. And to be quite honest, board members at any time could have brought up, hey, this is a conflict of interest,
Yes.
or could have changed the charter to begin with. I mean, whatever triggered the change could have been made at any given point in time. And honestly, the board members should not have appointed a local pharmacist, a head of a hospital, whatever. I mean, they should not have appointed people because it was in the charter to not have a conflict of interest. It just wasn't, people weren't following the charter. So to me, the policies were in place, the charter was in place, it just wasn't being abided by.
Well, if we don't have it to where it's in policy and we have a standard ethical conduct that we can set, for instance, we have the review boards, you have the planning and zoning boards. If all of a sudden I found out that my appointee had regulations against them from something, I would like to remove them, right? But then if the board has to sit there and debate whether that is or isn't in the future, that's a whole nother. To avoid all of that, you set the standards of ethical conduct for our people. If they break that, then it comes before the board and it's an easier, this is what it is, this is the rule, this is what we do. So that's all. So that's,
It's far easier to catch us on the front end than it would be to
Right.
catch it after the fact. And
No.
if we put some safeguards to steer it in the right direction on the front end, then hopefully we don't have that happen.
I hear you. I would, if we have a model that we can, if we have some models we can look at, I'm absolutely in favor of looking at that, so we're not starting from scratch. And of course, we're going to need the legal review as well.
no, I think it's completely respectful and part of the process. So, Paul, you understand that?
Yep.
Is there any other discussion on this? We'll hear back and bring it back. All right.